Hi, I'm Bea from Bea Kind. This video is part of a series of tutorials to accompany our range of fun and planet-friendly sewing and embroidery kits. So I'm going to be showing you in this video how to blanket stitch and stuff your animal. So this is an example of one of my finished animals. This is Riley the rhino. And generally most of my animals will be finished off with a blanket stitch, which just creates a really nice edge to finish the felt off. So to show you how to do it first, I'm just going to use a scrap of fabric and some contrast thread so that you can see it nice and clearly. So let's say I'm sewing around the edge of an animal, which is 2 layers. What I want to do to start the thread off, I've already knotted the end. And I'm just going to bring up the needle from the underneath of the top layer. So then that's nice and secure in place with the knot. So that started my thread off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the thread over and bring the needle through at the same place. So, and pull it through so that I've got a loop. And I'm not going to pull that through all the way. And then to create your blanket stitch, you just want to now tuck the needle from the front to the back through this loop. So it will look like this, and pull tight. And that's your starting stitch done. And then to continue, you want to start from the back layer and bring through again. And you're bringing the needle through where you want your stitch to end. So if you wanted to have quite a long stitch, you might bring it through quite low down, or if you wanted a really short stitch, you could bring it through further up. So I just want to make it the same length as this stitch. So I'm going to bring the needle up through both layers from the back. And again, until there's a little loop there. And then I'm just going to, again, pull the needle through the loop from the front to the back. So it's like that, and pull tight. And that's how to do your blanket stitch. So I'll just do one more. Bring the needle through from the back through both layers where you want the stitch to be. Pull till you've got a loop there, and take the needle through and pull tight so it's caught in place like that. So you'll need to use your body piece template as a reference, as it will be marked with where to start your blanket stitch. And you don't have to follow that, but that's just the easiest place that I find to start it. And it doesn't matter which direction you go, it's just rough to help you make it easier when you're stuffing it. And then I've got my needle threaded, and all the animals, when they're blanket stitched, will use one strand of thread. And if you need to reference that, it will be on your stitch diagram, which is in all the kits. And then I've got my stuffing, which is included in the kit. And I have my front and back giraffe piece and any pieces that will be sandwiched in it. So I've got my mane here, which is ready to go. And just as we did on the scrap piece of felt, I'm going to bring the needle up from the underside of the top layer of fabric. The knot will then secure it in place. Bring it over and through the same place till there's a loop, and then take my needle through and pull that tight to create the first stitch. And then going forward now, doing the blanket stitches, we'll go through both layers from the back through the loop and pull tight. So when you're doing your blanket stitch, you'll probably at some point need to change the thread. So mine's coming towards the end now. So I'm just going to show you how to finish the thread off and then start again when you need to do that. So what I'm going to do first of all to secure it a bit more is the stitch I've just made, I'm going to just take the needle through both layers of fabric and just go over that a couple of times to secure it a bit more. So I've just gone over it, the same stitch 4 times. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle through the 2 layers of felt and bring it out from the inside at another point. So I'm just going a few stitches along, which will just mean that the piece of thread on the inside has got a little bit of a tail before you tie your knot to secure the thread, so that if the knot was to come undone, there's a little bit of a tail that's going to stop it totally unravelling. So now I've got this little tail coming out on the outside. I'm just going to tie that in place with a knot as close to the felt as I can. So my knot's tied now, and I'm just going to trim the tail off, and that's how you finish the thread. And now that I'm ready to start again, I've got my embroidery thread and I'm going to just separate one strand again, tie the end in a knot, I usually do a couple to make it nice and secure, thread the needle again, and then I'm just going to bring the needle up through from the underside of the top layer again so that the knot's on the inside, and just start again as if I was starting blanket stitch. So I've now done a fair bit of my stitching. I've gone round here and up to here. So where the 2 pieces have been stitched around, they're starting to create a little pocket. So that's what I'm going to start putting the stuffing into. So I've got my stuffing here, and I've got my pen, which I'm just going to use to help put the stuffing into the thinner, more fiddly areas like the neck on the giraffe. And you only want to do small pieces of stuffing at a time so that it doesn't go lumpy. And I'm just going to gently pull it apart to loosen the fibres a bit, and that will mean it's nice and squishy and soft when you put it in. And I'm just going to open up my pocket on the animal and just gently push it in. So these feet are quite thin, so I'm going to use the pen here to help get it in a bit, like so. And you don't want to stuff it too hard or it will distort the felt, so you just want to do it nice and gently. So I've stuffed the point I'm up to with the stitching, and now I'm just going to keep stitching round, adding stuffing in as I go. So now I've got to the point where I want to attach the mane in. So I'm going to show you how to attach a piece between the 2 front and back halves when you're doing your stitching. And this is done on a few of my animals. I've got a few examples here. So the tail's trapped between the front and the back here. And then it's done on a few animals with the ears, like the rhino. And this spine on the crocodile is sandwiched between the front and the back pieces. And it's done on all my monkeys with their hands as well, which are sandwiched between the front and the back and attached with stitching. So I've blanket stitched round up to where the piece is attached. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sandwich it between the 2 layers about 1 centimetre in. Mean that it's nice and secure. And I'm just going to hold this with my hands so I can show you nice and clearly. but you could also pin this in place if you wanted it to be nice and secure. And you want all 3 pieces, the front, the back and whatever piece you're sandwiching in, to be nice and flat as you're stitching. What I'm going to do now, my needle and thread is still all attached because I've been blanket stitching. So I'm going to take the needle from the back through all 3 pieces to the point where I want my stitch to start, like so. So I'm going to bring that through, and that's made a little stitch. And then I'm going to bring the needle up and through the piece I'm sandwiching in and the back at the point I want the stitch to start at the back, which has then made a little vertical stitch here. So again, I'm going to bring the needle up and through the piece I'm sandwiching and the front piece where I want the stitch to start. Bring the needle up again, through the piece I'm sandwiching and the back where I want the stitch to start. So you're basically doing a sequence, so you've stitched all the way through the piece, each time going through the piece you're attaching and either the front or the back, depending on where your needle is. So this time I'm going through the piece I'm sandwiching and the front, then through the piece I'm sandwiching and the back. So again, up through the piece I'm sandwiching and front, up through the piece I'm sandwiching and back, up through the piece I'm sandwiching and front, up through the piece I'm sandwiching and back. So I'm just going to keep going with that now. Again, make sure your pieces are nice and flat as you go, so you might find some pins helpful to secure this in place, which you can just pin through all 3 layers. So now I've got to the point where I've stitched through the whole piece and I'm ready to do my blanket stitch again. So my needle's at the back at the moment, so what I'm going to do now is just bring it over and through and take my needle through the loop and tighten to continue blanket stitching. And that's how you sandwich a piece between the front and the back on any of my animals. So I've almost finished my giraffe now. I'm ready to close up the hole. I've sewn all the way round to this point and I've been stuffing as I go, and now I'm ready to continue stitching and finish it off at the point where I started. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tuck the stuffing in so there's not any stray fibres hanging out, which will just make it neater, and then keep blanket stitching round till I get to the point where I started. And if the stuffing does try to creep out a bit as you're doing this, you can just use your pen or whatever you're using to push it in.